They sent an ultimatum. We sent a mirror. Admiral Eva Rostova stood on the command deck of the Vindication, her knuckles white against the cool metal of the strategy table. Before her, a holographic representation of the Kepler 186F system shimmered, a sapphire star orbited by planets of jade and ochre. Dominating the display was the blockade, a brutal scarlet line of Vorlog ships cutting off the fledgling human colony on Kepler 186F from the rest of the galaxy. A crimson timer pulsed silently in the corner of the holotable 0400. The Vorlog doctrine was simple: surrender your world and its resources, or be sterilized from orbit. They called it the tally, a grim accounting of conquered systems. Humanity called it butchery. This time, the ultimatum had been delivered to Rostova's fleet, the 9th Battle Group Guardians of this sector. 4 hours until they begin atmospheric burn, Commander Jian Li said, his voice a low vibration that matched the deck plates. Their demand is unconditional surrender of the colony and our immediate withdrawal. Rostova's gaze was fixed on the Vorlog flagship, the Reckoner. Lyra, she said, addressing the fleet's integrated mind, her voice calm but resonant with tempered steel. What is the cost of compliance? Lyra's synthesized voice, a soothing contralto, filled the bridge. Compliance ensures the survival of the fleet, Admiral. However, it condemns 1.2 million colonists to servitude under the Vorlog tally. Our doctrine does not permit such a sacrifice. The ledger demands a response. Rostova nodded slowly, the slight movement a command in itself. She had spent a career staring down bullies who saw mercy as weakness. The Vorlog understood only strength and submission, a binary choice she refused to accept. The 9th Battle Group was not a hammer designed for smashing. It was a scalpel crafted for precision and, when necessary, pain. They believe we have 2 choices: run or die. Rostova stated, her eyes narrowing. We will offer them a third. She swept her hand across the holotable, and the icons representing her fleet shifted. They expect a frontal assault or a desperate flight. They will receive neither. Prepare the mirror lattice. A murmur went through the bridge crew, a mix of apprehension and fierce resolve. The mirror lattice was a new strategy, a ghost in the machine of interstellar warfare. It was a bluff built on light and data designed to turn an enemy's certainty into their fatal flaw. The coolant hissed in the bulkheads, a steady counterpoint to the thrumming tension. You cannot threaten a people who remember every cost. Jian's fingers danced across his console, bringing up the deployment schematics. The lattice drones are ready, Admiral. Power consumption will be significant. We'll be running on fumes if this drags out. It won't. Rostova replied, the conviction in her voice a tangible force. The Vorlog are arrogant. They broadcast their ultimatum on all channels for all their subjugated worlds to witness. They are performing. She tapped the icon for the Reckoner. We will give them a performance they will never forget. On the civilian transport, Stargazer caught just inside the blockade line, a young girl named Ilara pressed her face against the viewport. She watched the distant, menacing shapes of the Vorlog ships, tiny daggers of light against the velvet black. Her father, a terraforming engineer, held her shoulder. The Admiral will protect us, he whispered, though his own fear scented the recycled air. Humans don't abandon their own. Lyra's voice returned crisp and analytical. Admiral, the Vorlog fleet is holding its position rigidly. Their energy signatures are stable, consistent with a blockade posture. They are waiting for the timer to expire. Patience is a virtue they have yet to learn. Rostova murmured. Deploy the first drone wing. Slave them to my mark. We will teach them about reflections. They will learn the shape of their own arrogance. The launch bays of the Vindication slid open with a low groan that vibrated through the ship. A swarm of small, polished drones, the mirrors ejected into the void. They were simple things, really. A small thruster package, a sophisticated sensor reflector, and a basic command link AI. Individually, they were gnats. Collectively, they were a phantom. Drones are away. Jian confirmed, his eyes tracking the green icons as they spread out. They are forming the primary lattice array beyond the dark side of Kepler 186e. Rostova watched the timer tick down, 03:45:12. Every second felt like a drop of water on a hot plate hissing away into nothing. She could feel the faint tremor of the ship's fusion core, a caged star that powered their defiance. Lyra began the ghost sequence. Project a single heavy cruiser signature right at the edge of their long-range sensors. Make it look like a scout attempting a run. Projecting now, Lyra confirmed. The lead Vorlog destroyer is pivoting to intercept. Their command channel is lighting up with chatter. A single drone, its reflective surfaces angled perfectly, began to mimic the energy output and sensor profile of a human warship. To the Vorlog, it appeared as a lone, desperate vessel. It was the bait. The rest of the drones, thousands of them, remained dark and silent, drifting into a precise system-spanning web. We hold the line with light and lies. The Vorlog destroyer. The gavel surged forward, its weapon ports glowing with anticipated fire. It was a predictable, brutal response. The Vorlog Commander A, being known only as the Adjudicator, would see this as proof of human desperation. On the Vindication's bridge, the tension was a physical presence, a weight on every shoulder. They're taking it. Jian breathed, a thin smile touching his lips. They're falling for it completely. Arrogance is a reliable lubricant for tactical error. Rostova said, her voice even. The Adjudicator is showing his entire fleet how to handle a single fleeing ship. He's teaching them to be predictable. A faint scent of ozone from an overworked conduit reached her, a sharp reminder of the power being diverted. The lone drone, the ghost cruiser, jinked and weaved, its simulated engine flaring as if under strain. It was a masterful illusion, a dance of photons and manipulated data. The gavel fired a volley of plasma torpedoes, brilliant streaks of incandescent rage that crossed the void. The drone simply vanished, its signature snuffed out as its mission was complete. Their certainty is the cage we will lock from the outside. The Adjudicator on this reckoner would see the kill confirmation. A minor victory, but a satisfying one. It would reinforce his belief that the humans were weak, their technology inferior. He would not notice the thousands of other drones that had used the distraction to settle into their final positions, silent and waiting. The countdown continued its relentless march, 3:10:47. The lattice is now active, Lyra announced. All drones are in position and networked. We now have a sensor map of the entire system that is orders of magnitude more detailed than theirs. Rostova allowed herself a small, grim smile. Now we show them their own reflection. She gave the command. Phase 2. Light the stage. Across the system, in carefully orchestrated sequence, dozens of drones activated their reflectors in unison. They caught the ambient light from the distant star and focused it, creating fleeting, brilliant flashes. More importantly, they began to return the Vorlog's own sensor pings, but altered, amplified, delayed, and shifted. Their eyes will become their enemy. On the bridge of the Vorlog flagship, the Adjudicator watched his tactical display dissolve into chaos. Suddenly, the lone human fleet had become a swarm. Hundreds of contacts bloomed out of the darkness, each one screaming the energy signature of a human warship. They were everywhere, on his flanks, behind his lines, even appearing deep inside his own formation. Impossible. The Adjudicator hissed, his mandibles clacking in agitation. They are decoys, target the strongest signatures and fire at will. But the mirror lattice was more than simple decoys. It was a dynamic, intelligent system. As the Vorlog ships fired on the most prominent ghosts, the lattice would shift. The targeted drones would go dark, while others would flare up, creating the illusion that the human ships had impossibly dodged the incoming fire and repositioned themselves in an instant. They are reporting mass confusion, Jian said, monitoring the decrypted Vorlog communications. Multiple ships are firing on phantom targets. 2 of their frigates almost collided while chasing the same ghost. The glare from his console cast his face in a stark, predatory light. A junior officer, Ensign Thorne, watched the unfolding chaos with wide eyes. "We're not even fighting them," she whispered, awestruck. "We're making them fight the darkness." Rostova overheard her. "We are teaching them that the darkness has teeth, Ensign, and that it answers to us. We will teach them the geometry of fear." The Vorlog fleet, once a rigid, disciplined line of steel, was beginning to fray. Ships broke formation to pursue illusions, wasting precious energy and fuel. Their communications became a frantic cacophony of contradictory sightings and panicked reports. They were swinging at shadows, and the strain was beginning to show. Rostova felt the deck vibrate as the Vindication subtly adjusted its position, using the chaos as cover to move deeper into the system. The timer ticked on 02:35:00. Half the time was gone, and the Vorlog had yet to land a single meaningful blow. They had only succeeded in bruising their own ego. Admiral Lyra's voice cut through the controlled hum of the bridge. "The adjudicator is adapting. He has ordered his fleet to cease firing and hold their positions. He is attempting to filter our ghosts from the sensor noise." A sensible move, Rostova conceded. "But he's still looking for ships. He still believes his eyes." She turned to Jian. "It's time to introduce the convoy. Let's give him something solid to look at." They asked for a target. "We shall provide." Deep within the asteroid belt on the system's edge, a small convoy of heavily shielded cargo haulers had been waiting. They were not warships, but they were massive, and their hulls were coated in the same reflective material as the drones. At Rostova's command, they powered up their engines and began to move not away from the blockade, but directly towards it. On the Vorlog sensors, it was an act of supreme foolishness. A handful of civilian ships, escorted by what appeared to be a few human cruisers, more ghosts from the lattice, were making a suicidal charge. The adjudicator snarled in what passed for a Vorlog smile. The humans were finally showing their desperation. "All ships," the adjudicator broadcasted to his fleet, his voice dripping with contempt. "The prey presents itself. Form a kill corridor. Let us remind these primitives of the tally." The Vorlog ships began to move, reorienting themselves to create a channel of overlapping firing arcs. It was a classic maneuver designed to obliterate anything that dared to pass through it. It was also exactly what Rostova had been waiting for. The heat from the bridge's life support vents washed over her, a warm breath before the plunge. "Their kill box is the door we intend to open. He's creating a corridor," Jian said, his voice tight with anticipation. "He's pulling his ships from the flanks to thicken the walls. He is concentrating his force." Rostova confirmed. "He is creating a blind spot." "Lyra are the real elements of the 9th Battle Group in position." "Affirmative, Admiral," the AI replied. "Strike groups Alpha and Beta are masked by the asteroid belt's interference. We are undetected." The true warships of the 9th Battle Group, the destroyers and cruisers that had remained silent and hidden, were now perfectly positioned on the weakened flanks of the Vorlog formation. The adjudicator, so focused on the tempting target in his kill corridor, had voluntarily thinned the very lines that were supposed to protect him. The civilian vignette played in Rostova's mind, a father promising his daughter a safety he couldn't guarantee. Rostova intended to make that promise true. "The convoy is entering the corridor," Jian reported. The holographic display showed the haulers moving steadily forward, flanked by shimmering, indistinct shapes projected by the mirror lattice. "Tell the convoy to begin their deployment," Rostova ordered. "On my mark." This is the moment the mirror shows its edge. As the lead hauler reached the midpoint of the Vorlog corridor, its massive cargo doors slid open. But it was not supplies or colonists that emerged. Instead, thousands more mirror drones, previously inert and shielded within the hold, poured into the void. They activated instantly, catching the Vorag ship's targeting beams and reflecting them back in a chaotic, blinding cascade of light. At the same time, the other haulers opened their doors, releasing swarms of electronic warfare pods. A storm of jamming signals and false commands flooded the Vorlog network. Their targeting locks failed. Their communications devolved into static. Their perfectly constructed kill box had become a hall of mirrors, a disorienting trap of their own making. Now, Rostova said, her voice cutting through the bridge like a diamond. Strike groups, Alpha and Beta, you are cleared to engage. Target their engines and weapons only. Settle the account. From the cover of the asteroid belt, the real human warships surged forward. They did not fire indiscriminately. Their plasma cannons and laser arrays targeted the weak points the lattice had exposed, disabling Vorlog engines with surgical precision. They shredded weapon emplacements, silencing the guns that were meant to sterilize a world. Their strength has become their shackle. The Adjudicator watched in horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled. The human ships were not where his sensors had told him they were. They were ghosts made real, striking from the darkness he thought he controlled. His kill corridor had become a cage, and he was trapped inside it, with an enemy who moved like light itself. He saw the Gavel, the same destroyer that had so arrogantly dispatched the first Phantom drone, lose its primary drive. The ship tumbled helplessly, its powerful main gun silenced. Another cruiser, the Verdict, found its weapon ports fused shut by a precisely aimed laser barrage. The 9th Battle Group was not destroying ships, it was disarming them piece by piece. The countdown timer read 1:15:32. The ultimatum was broken. The blockade was shattered. But the lesson was not yet over. The cost of their doctrine had to be made clear not just to the Adjudicator, but to the entire Vorlog hegemony. Lyra Rostova set her eyes fixed on the crippled but still dangerous Vorlog flagship. Open a direct channel to the Reckoner. No encryption. I want every ship in this system and every listening post in this sector to hear this. A chance to learn is a mercy they did not offer. A moment later, a connection was established. A view screen flickered to life, showing the furious, chitinous face of the Adjudicator. His bridge was a scene of controlled chaos, sparks raining from a damaged conduit behind him. Human Admiral the Adjudicator rasped his voice, a low growl of fury. You have used trickery and cowardice. This changes nothing. The tally will be paid. Rostova's expression was unreadable, a mask of calm authority. Adjudicator, you came to this system to deliver an ultimatum, a binary choice of submission or death. You assumed we would play by your rules. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping, but losing none of its intensity. The hull of the Vindication hummed a low and steady heartbeat. We do not accept your rules. We do not honor ultimatums built on the graves of civilians. She gestured to the holotable, where the icons of his disabled fleet blinked in red. You have been defeated not by superior firepower, but by a superior philosophy. You saw targets. We saw a system. You saw a line to be held. We saw a trap to be sprung. A new reckoning is at hand. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Rostova continued her words, a clear and deliberate statement of principle. Today's lesson is in humility. Your fleet is crippled, but not destroyed. Your crews are alive. We have fired only to disarm, not to kill. The Adjudicator stared, his rage momentarily replaced by disbelief. This was not how warfare was conducted. Victory meant annihilation. Mercy was a fiction for the weak. What is your demand? He finally spat. This is not a demand. It is a statement of consequence, Rostova corrected him. Your ultimatum is void. You will withdraw your fleet from this system and transmit on all Vorlog public channels a full and uncensored record of this engagement. The recording provided by my fleet mind, Lyra, will be the only one accepted. She paused, letting the weight of the condition settle. Let your people see the price of their doctrine. Let them see a blockade broken not by bombs, but by mirrors. Let them see that their tally is a flawed and costly instrument. The balance is not paid in blood, but in truth. The adjudicator's mandibles worked silently. To refuse would mean the complete destruction of his fleet. The human admiral had him, and she knew it. But to accept was to broadcast his own humiliation, to show the conquered worlds that the Vorlog were not invincible. It was a poisoned dart aimed at the heart of their empire's authority. You will then leave, Rostova concluded, and you will not return. The people of Kepler 186F will remain free. That is the only outcome. The choice of how you depart in pieces or in shame is yours. She cut the connection, leaving the adjudicator to stew in the ruins of his arrogance. The bridge of the Vindication was silent, save for the soft chime of consoles reporting the continued stability of the disabled Vorlog fleet. The countdown timer, now irrelevant, read 00:58:17. Jan let out a long, slow breath. He will comply, he said. His own doctrine prizes survival above honor. He will choose shame. Shame is a more patient teacher than death, Rostova replied, turning her gaze back to the sapphire star. The first cost of victory was already being calculated. 2 of the Ninth's destroyers, the Steadfast and the Orion, had reported minor hull breaches from stray weapons fire during the charge. Several crew members had sustained minor burns when a power conduit overloaded. The price was acceptable. Never again will they issue a threat without checking the reflection first. Hours later, the Vorlog fleet began its slow, limping withdrawal. As they left, a massive data packet bloomed across interstellar comms, Lyra's perfect, unedited recording of the battle. The mirror lattice had not only won the day, it had become a story, a legend broadcast to every corner of Vorlog space. A story of how an ultimatum was answered with an echo of its own hubris. As the last Vorlog ship warped out of the system, a message arrived from the colony below. It was a simple audio file, the sound of 1.2 million people cheering. The sound of a future that had been snatched back from the brink. Rostova listened, allowing the sound to wash over the bridge, a balm on the tension of the last few hours. A junior technician on Deck 4 paused her repair work on a scorched panel. She looked at a small framed photo taped to her toolkit, her brother, who served on a colony ship near Vorlog space. Today, his future felt a little safer. The scent of ozone was finally fading, replaced by the clean, metallic smell of a ship at peace. Lyra, Rostova said softly. Log this engagement. Title it, The Adjudicator's Lesson. And add a note. The 9th Battle Group holds its ground by offering a better way. Logged Admiral, the fleet mind replied. Shall I begin calculating the resource cost for the expended drones? Yes, Rostova said. Every cost must be tallied. It is how we learn. Their doctrine was a sword. Ours is a shield that teaches. The Vindication and its fleet moved to a high guard orbit over Kepler 186F, its lights like steady stars in the night. Below, the colonists looked up and saw not just protectors, but teachers. The battle was over, but the message it sent was just beginning its journey. A message that humanity would not be cowed, would not be broken, and would always find a way to turn an enemy's strength into their most profound weakness. But Rostova knew this was just one victory. The Vorlog were a vast and powerful empire. The Adjudicator was only one commander. Somewhere deep in their territory, a new fleet was already being assembled, a new plan being drawn. Their doctrine was old and deeply ingrained. One lesson, no matter how sharp, might not be enough. Jian approached the command table, his face etched with a weary concern. Admiral, long-range reconnaissance is picking up something. A massive energy buildup on the edge of the Cinderfall Nebula deep in their space. The console glare highlighted the worry in his eyes. Lyra's voice followed, calm and unnervingly precise. Analysis confirms the signature. It is consistent with the activation of a tally fleet. Not a battle group admiral, a full fleet. Their response to this lesson is escalation. A heavier hand is raised in the dark. Rostova's jaw tightened. A tally fleet was a force of extermination, a weapon used not for conquest, but for erasure. It was the ultimate expression of the Vorlog doctrine, deployed only to make an example of a species deemed truly defiant. They had not learned humility. They had learned hatred. How long, Rostova asked, her voice dangerously quiet. At their current rate of assembly and travel, they will be here in 72 hours, Lyra stated. Their fleet is 10 times our size. Direct confrontation would be statistically unsurvivable. The brief elation of their victory evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard reality of the consequences. They had won the battle, but in doing so, they had provoked the war. The adjudicator's shame had become the seed of a far greater threat. The air on the bridge grew heavy again, thick with the unspoken question, how do you mirror a tidal wave? They believe we are trapped, Jian said, verbalizing the grim tactical reality. The colony is a fixed point. We can't abandon it. They know we will have to stand and fight. Holding the line is not always about standing still. Rostova looked at the holographic map, at the single star system they had just saved, now marked as the target for an overwhelming force. Her mind raced, sifting through strategies, tactics, and the core tenets of her command. They had taught a lesson in deception and precision. Now they had to teach one in consequence. The adjudicator showed his fleet our reflection, Rostova said, her thoughts crystallizing. Now we will show their entire empire its own future. A future where the tally is not a tool of conquest, but a self-inflicted wound. She turned to her command team, her eyes burning with a cold, focused fire. The mirror lattice was Phase 1. It was designed to disarm and teach. Now we begin Phase 2. She swept her hand across the hollow table, and a new set of plans began to form, intricate and audacious. Lyra, she commanded, recall every drone. We're going to rebuild the lattice, but this time it won't be a passive mirror. It will be a lens. Their rage will be the fuel for their own undoing. The crew of the 9th Battle Group, having just secured a flawless victory, found themselves thrust back into a state of high alert. Maintenance crews worked tirelessly, their movements sharp and efficient, replacing the expended power cells in the mirror drones and recalibrating their reflective surfaces. The hum of the ship was no longer one of peace, but of preparation, a coiled spring tightening with immense potential energy. A young logistics officer overseeing the drone replenishment felt a tremor run through the deck. It wasn't a jolt from an impact, but a deep, resonant thrum of the ship's primary systems being pushed to their theoretical limits. She steadied herself against a bulkhead, the cool metal a small anchor in the rising tide of anticipation. Her job was simple: count the assets, balance the ledger of readiness. And the numbers told her they were about to do something impossible. The tally fleet's composition is confirmed, Lyra reported to the bridge. 300 capital ships supported by over 1,000 frigates and destroyers. Their flagship is the final word. They are not configured for a blockade. They are configured for orbital bombardment and planetary scouring. They are coming to make a statement, Jian observed grimly, and we will ensure it is not the one they intend, Rostova countered. She stood before the hollow table, sculpting her plan with gestures of light. The Cinderfall Nebula. They chose it as their staging ground for a reason. It is dense with interstellar dust and gases masking their energy signature until the last moment. Their shroud will become their stage. Rostova's finger traced a path from the nebula to their system. But that dust is also a medium. It can carry and refract energy. Lyra. I want every drone positioned not here but there. Her hand designated a wide, concave arc deep within the nebula itself, pages of space away from Kepler. F. Jian's eyes widened as he grasped the sheer audacity of the plan. Admiral, you mean to engage them before they even arrive inside the nebula? We will not engage them, Rostova corrected. We will prepare their reception. The Vorlog broadcast their ultimatums because they believe in the power of witness. They want their subject worlds to watch and despair. Her lips formed a thin, hard line. We will give them an audience. The plan was complex, bordering on reckless. It involved sending the entire drone swarm on a high-speed automated transit to the nebula. There, they would arrange themselves into a vast, system-sized parabolic mirror. It was an engineering challenge of staggering proportions, requiring perfect coordination and timing. A single, misaligned drone could ruin the entire effect. A reckoning does not need a witness when it records itself. The drones will not have fleet support. Jian pointed out the most glaring risk. They will be vulnerable during their transit and deployment. The Vorlog are not looking for gnats on the edge of their staging area, Rostova said. They are focused on their destination, on the message of overwhelming force they plan to deliver. Their arrogance is the constant we can rely on. The suit under her uniform felt tight, a constant pressure mirroring the tactical situation. Rostova authorized the launch. Once again, the bays of the 9th Battle Group opened, releasing the swarms of mirror drones. But this time they did not drift. They streaked away, their drives burning hot and fast, becoming a river of faint lights that quickly vanished into the star-dusted blackness, heading towards the ominous, swirling clouds of the Cinderfall Nebula. The countdown was no longer on their screen. It was an internal clock measured in the estimated travel time of the enemy fleet. 70 hours. The Vindication and her sister ships were now truly alone, their greatest weapons sent far ahead, a speculative investment in the enemy's predictable psychology. They think we are the nail. They forget we are the hand that set the trap. On board the Vorlog flagship, Final Word, the new adjudicator, a battle-hardened veteran named Krell, reviewed the final assault plans. The previous commander's failure was a stain he was tasked to erase with fire. His orders were simple: make the humans an object lesson in the cost of defiance. There would be no ultimatum this time, no conversation, only a final, unanswerable tally. The fleet is formed, his sub-commander reported. All ships report ready for the burn to Kepler 186. Krell looked at the target coordinates, a single insignificant system where a species of upstarts had dared to humiliate the hegemony. Their tricks with light and shadows will not save them from plasma and radiation, he growled. Their cleverness has earned them only a more absolute end. He gave the order. Engage. The Tally fleet. A city of warships ignited its engines. A wave of unimaginable energy propelled it forward, a spear of vengeance aimed at the heart of the 9th Battle Group's territory. They moved as one, a monolith of destructive purpose, utterly blind to the silent, intricate web being woven in the dust clouds just ahead of them. We will not fight the storm, we will redirect it. 68 hours later, the mirror drones reported their final positions. Lyra's voice was a calm island in the sea of tension on the Vindication's bridge. The parabolic lens is complete, Admiral. All drones are networked and stable. They are invisible against the nebula's background radiation. Rostova stood motionless, her gaze distant. She was not looking at the holotable anymore. She was visualizing the vast, invisible structure they had built in the dark, a masterpiece of physics and audacity. A trap made not of mines or missiles, but of simple, elegant reflection. The Tally fleet is 2 hours from the lens's focal point, Lyra updated. The bridge crew held their collective breath. The air was thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and nervous sweat. Every officer was at their station, their hands hovering over consoles, even though the battle would take place light years away, fought by their silent proxies. The only sound was the low, steady hum of the ship's life support. They are accelerating. Jian noted, his knuckles white. pushing their drives for a faster arrival. They are eager, good Rostova said, her voice a bare whisper. Eagerness makes them burn brighter. Their own fire will be their judge. As the Vorlog Tally fleet hurtled through the Cinderfall Nebula, the ship's powerful engines vented incredible amounts of energy, heat, light, and radiation into the surrounding dust clouds. It was a spectacular and terrifying display of power, a brute force approach to interstellar travel. This raw, undirected energy was precisely what Rostova's plan depended on. Lyra Rostova commanded, her voice ringing with absolute authority. The fleet is entering the focal zone. On my mark, activate the lens. The Vorlog fleet crossed an invisible line in space. Mark, far away in the swirling dust of the nebula, thousands of drones made a microscopic adjustment to their angles. The vast concave mirror previously invisible came to life. It gathered the monumental waste energy pouring from the engines of the Tally fleet. Every stray photon, every wasted gigawatt of thermal radiation was caught, focused, and redirected. It did not create an explosion. It did not fire a beam. It simply took the Vorlog's own power, the very symbol of their might, and reflected it back onto the fleet's own tail. A mirror held to a star will burn. On the bridge of the final word warning, chimes erupted with frantic, overlapping urgency. Engine breach, a technician screamed. Multiple ships reporting catastrophic overheating in their drive plumes. It's feeding back on itself. Adjudicator Krell stared at his display in disbelief. Ship after ship at the rear of his formation was flashing with critical damage icons. Their engines, designed to vent unimaginable heat outwards, were suddenly being contained in a focused, intensifying loop of their own energy. Reactors designed for a cold void were being cooked in their own exhaust. The effect was not instantaneous destruction. It was worse. It was a slow, agonizing, and inescapable dissolution. Drives melted. Hulls buckled under thermal stress. Power conduits overloaded, sending cascading failures throughout the afflicted ships. The rear guard of the mighty Tally fleet was being systematically unraveled by its own power signature. What is happening? Krell demanded, his voice shaking with a rage born of confusion. Are we under attack? There are no weapons signatures, his sensor officer cried out. There is nothing there. Just us. We are not your enemy. Your doctrine is. The Tally fleet was a serpent eating its own tail. The ships in the front, still accelerating, poured more energy into the lens, which in turn focused it more intensely on the ships in the back. To slow down would be to flounder in a self-made furnace. To speed up would only make the furnace hotter. They were trapped in a paradox of their own, making a perfect strategic checkmate delivered from light years away. Aboard the Vindication, Rostova and her crew watched the data stream in. They saw the chaos, the dying ships, the collapse of the unshakable Vorlog formation. There was no celebration, only a grim, somber vindication. They were witnessing the cost of a philosophy that prized power above all else. Power, when turned upon itself, becomes the perfect agent of destruction. Lyra Rostova said, her voice steady. Begin a broad-spectrum broadcast to all known Vorlog frequencies. Patch it directly from the lens's sensor drones. Let them see it all, unfiltered. The feed went live. Across the Vorlog hegemony, on public displays and military command decks, the image appeared, their invincible Tally fleet, the ultimate instrument of their doctrine, tearing itself apart in a silent, brilliant storm of its own creation. There were no human ships in sight. There was no enemy to blame. There was only the stark, undeniable truth of a flawed design. The ledger is balanced. The tally is paid. By you. Adjudicator Krell watched the transmission, his own fleet's death throes playing out on his main view screen, broadcast by an enemy he couldn't see. The irony was a physical acid in his throat. He had come to be the final word, and now he was rendered speechless, a reluctant witness to a strategic masterpiece. His ships were not being defeated. They were being inverted, turned into instruments of their own destruction by an invisible hand. The deck beneath his feet vibrated not with the steady power of a fleet underway, but with the discordant death rattles of distant reactors. "Cut the external broadcast," Krell roared, but his communications officer shook his massive head. "We can't adjudicate her. The signal is everywhere. It's being routed from the source of the phenomenon itself. To block it, we'd have to blind ourselves to the very thing that is killing us." Panic was a contagion, and it was spreading through his command staff. The invincible Tally fleet, the pride of the hegemony, was being humiliated and dismantled. More than that, it was being taught. The lesson was brutal, elegant, and inescapable. Your power is your prison. A choice made in the fire is rarely the right one. The feedback loop is intensifying. The tactical officer reported, his voice strained. "We have lost the entire rear third of the fleet. They are gone. The ships in the middle are now taking the brunt of the focused energy." Krell's mind, honed by decades of predictable warfare, struggled to comprehend the geometry of his defeat. They were being killed by their own wake. He saw the only possible path, a desperate and spiteful gambit. It was no longer about victory, but about scarring the smug victor. "The Vanguard is still operational," Krell declared, his voice a harsh rasp. "The lead 50 ships. They are ahead of the focal point's main concentration. Detach them from the formation. Order them to continue the mission. A direct maximum burn assault on the human colony. They will not stop. They will not deviate. They will become the final word, even if it is the last one they ever speak." It was an order of pure malice, a final spasm of a dying doctrine. He was sacrificing his vanguard, burning them out in a final furious charge, hoping to land a single devastating blow. A low hum of failing conduits filled the air, a constant reminder of their slow-motion collapse. "You cannot outrun a reckoning that travels at the speed of light." On the Vindication. Lyra's voice was devoid of emotion, yet it carried the weight of a death sentence. "Admiral, the Vorlog flagship is detaching its vanguard. 50 capital ships are breaking formation and accelerating towards our position. Estimated time to arrival 6 hours. Jian swore under his breath, a sharp, violent sound in the controlled quiet of the bridge. A spite run. A final, useless gesture of hate. They can't win, but they can still burn the colony. Rostova's face was carved from granite. She had hoped the lesson would be enough. She had hoped the truth broadcast for all to see would cauterize the wound of the Vorlog's pride. Instead, they had chosen to fester. Her mercy had been perceived as an opening for one last act of brutality. The console's glare seemed to intensify, reflecting the cold fire in her eyes. "They have rejected the lesson on humility," Rostova stated, her voice resonating with a new, harder edge. "So the final lesson must be one in control. They will learn that our mercy has a very hard edge." All ships, she commanded, her voice filling the fleet-wide channel. "Recall all local drone patrols. Form a defensive perimeter around Kepler 86F. We are no longer the teachers. We are the shield." Her arc of transformation was completing its turn. The strategist who preferred to win with light and shadow was now preparing to stand her ground with steel and fire. The choice had been taken from her. The Vorlog had demanded a fight, and Rostova would give them one they could not comprehend. On the planet below, the broadcast had brought a wave of euphoric relief. In the central plaza of the capital city, Unity colonists had watched the distant, silent destruction of the Tally fleet, their fears melting away. The girl Ilara had hugged her father, laughing. But now a new alert sounded, and the smiling face of their planetary governor was replaced with a grim warning. A part of the fleet had broken through. They were coming. The joy in the streets curdled back into a cold dread. Lyra Rostova said, watching the icons of the 50 incoming ships. Give me a projection of their energy states upon arrival. They are running their engines far beyond safety limits, the AI reported. By the time they reach us, their reactors will be on the verge of catastrophic failure. They will be little more than 50 unguided missiles with crews inside. A suicide run is not a strategy. It is an admission of defeat. They don't intend to fight a battle, Jian realized aloud. They intend to die, and to take as much of the colony with them as they can. Rostova nodded, her gaze fixed on the approaching red icons. They still think in terms of blunt force. They think the only way to stop a missile is with a wall. She turned to her weapons officer. Prepare the gravity projectors. Slave their control to Lyra's primary processing core. Cooldown protocols are secondary. I want maximum field integrity. The gravity projectors were a defensive tool designed to deflect asteroids and space debris. They had never been used as a weapon in this manner. It was another page from a playbook no one else had ever read. The faint scent of ozone returned to the bridge as power was shunted to the ship's most power-hungry systems. The 6 hours passed like a lifetime. The 9th battle group held its position, a silent waiting crescent of ships, between the enemy and the green world at their backs. The Vorlog vanguard grew from sensor ghosts to hard contacts, their energy signatures screaming across the void. They were burning themselves alive to deliver their payload of hate. We will be the anchor against their final empty tide. They are in range, the tactical officer announced, his voice tight. The Vorlog ships, glowing with the heat of their suicidal burn, did not fire. They did not maneuver. They simply came a straight line of incandescent rage. Their goal was clear: to slam into the planet's atmosphere and detonate their unstable cores, creating a mass extinction event. Lyra Rostova said, her voice the calm center of the storm. You are in control of the projectors. Do not break them. Bend them. Across the human fleet, powerful invisible fields of gravimetric force bloomed into existence. They did not form a wall. Instead, Lyra, with the processing power of a star, wove them together into something far more complex: a lens. Not a lens for light this time, but for the fabric of space-time itself. The universe itself has rules they cannot break. As the first Vorlog ship hit the outermost edge of the gravity field, it was not stopped. It was deflected. Its vector shifted by a single infinitesimal degree. The second ship, hitting a slightly different point in the field, was nudged in another direction. The third, another. Lyra was not blocking the attack. She was curating it. With thousands of minute, precise adjustments per second, she was using the gravity lens to gently, almost imperceptibly, alter the trajectory of every single incoming ship. The Vorlog pilots, locked into their final desperate charge, would barely feel the change. They were still moving at incredible speed. They were still on a collision course, but they were no longer aimed at the planet. Lyra was re-aiming them one by one at the empty center of their own formation. She was folding their straight line of attack into a circle. Their perfect spear will tie itself into a knot. The lead Vorlog ship, having passed through the entire human fleet's defensive screen unscathed, suddenly found its trajectory curving. The pilot, confused, saw his target, the planet, drifting impossibly out of his view screen. Then he saw something else. The ship that had been flying beside him was now directly in front of him. Warning alerts for imminent collision shrieked across 50 Vorlog bridges at once. They had been so focused on their target that they had not realized their formation was being warped, bent back on itself. They were no longer a spear. They were a maelstrom of their own making. The first collision was a silent, brilliant flash of light. A chain reaction followed as the other ships, their reactors already critical, slammed into the burgeoning fireball. 50 ships, 50 crews, 50 payloads of spite, all converged on a single point in space that had been empty moments before. They had become their own target. The result was a new temporary star that burned with ferocious, white-hot intensity. A funeral pyre for a dead doctrine lit by the very hands of its most fervent believers. A fist clenched too tightly breaks its own bones. On the bridge of the Vindication, the crew watched the man-made star blaze and then slowly fade. They had not fired a single shot. They had not launched a single missile. They had simply held their ground and offered a final, irrefutable lesson in physics. The deck plates beneath their feet were steady, the ship's core humming a song of quiet power. Rostova watched the last embers of the Vorlog vanguard die out. The cost of this victory was the confirmation of a hard truth some would rather burn than learn. She felt the immense weight of the decisions she had made, the lives she had saved, and the enemy she had so thoroughly and bloodlessly dismantled. "Lyra," she said, her voice soft, but echoing in the profound silence. "Open a channel to the Vorlog High Command. Use the same frequency their adjudicator Krell used to order that final charge. I am sure they are listening." A connection tone chirped once. The channel was open. The remnants of the Tally fleet were still limping away from the Cinderfall Nebula, their shame now compounded by the utter failure of their final spiteful act. Their empire was built on ultimatums. Ours is built on answers. "This is Admiral Eva Rostova of the Human Federation Fleet," she began, her voice calm, clear, and carrying the immense authority she had earned. "You have witnessed the failure of your Tally. You have seen your greatest fleet dismantled by its own energy, and your final desperate attack turned into a monument to its own futility." She paused, letting the silence stretch across the stars. "Your doctrine of ultimatums is over. It is a broken tool, and you will never be allowed to wield it again. From this moment forward, the record of these events, what my fleet mind has titled The Adjudicator's Lesson, will be the defining document in all diplomatic relations with your people. We are adding a new entry to the public galactic ledger," she continued, her words becoming the final verdict. "The Vorlog hegemony's privilege to issue unconditional demands upon other sovereign powers is hereby and permanently rescinded. Any attempt to violate this will be considered an act of galactic piracy and will be met with the full and final consequences you have witnessed here today." There is no argument against a perfectly balanced account. She did not wait for a reply. There was none they could give. She had not asked a question or made a demand. She had stated a new reality, one she had the power to enforce. She closed the channel. The precedent was set. The institutional change was locked. The Vorlog's primary tool of expansion had been publicly broken and legally voided. The cost to them was not just ships, but the very foundation of their power sphere. They could no longer rule by threat alone. Admiral Gian said, his voice filled with a reverence that was echoed on the faces of every crew member. "What are your orders?" Rostova looked at the planet below Kepler 186f, now safe and secure under their watch. She saw the lights of unity shining in the darkness, a small beacon of a very different philosophy. Her arc was complete, from a commander defined by restraint to a leader who had decisively redrawn the lines of galactic law through sheer strategic and moral clarity. Lyra's calculations had provided the tools, but Rostova's humanity had aimed them. The 9th Battle Group's shield lights activated, casting a gentle protective glow over the planet as they settled into a long-term Guardian orbit. On the main view screen, a new entry flickered to life on the official Galactic Concord Ledger, visible to all species: Vorlog Hegemony Ultimatum Doctrine, privileges revoked. Sci-Fi engagement. Battle Group Kepler 186. Status permanent. The tally was confirmed. "The universe is a vast and complex place," Rostova said, her voice a quiet monologue, meant for her crew and for herself. "It does not answer to threats. It does not yield to rage. It responds only to the forces you apply to it. We came here not to conquer, but to teach a simple truth: a mirror only shows you what you are. If you are a monster, you will see a monster. But if you are a shield, you will see a future worth protecting. Their story ends with a period. Ours begins with an open door.